Hello, guys, and welcome to day 3 of the 7 Pillars of a Woman Challenge. Today, we're going to talk about motherhood and parenting and the amazing gift that is raising children. And I also want to just share with you guys, whatever stage you're in, whether you, and even yesterday, talking about, marriage, and whether you're a newlywed, whether you're single, whether you've been married for 40 years. I see some of the comments of our amazing followers and our amazing women, I should say, our amazing world changers. So many of you are in different stages. And if you're here today, I know there are women who posted, I'm in this stage, or I've got this thing going on in my life. And I just want you to know it's okay. If you're here today as a mother and you have children who are grown, maybe your children aren't where you want them to be. Maybe there's some brokenness or trauma in that story. I want you to know there's hope. Same thing with marriage. Wherever you're at, I talked about this yesterday, but there is so much hope, and it's never too late for restoration. It's never too late to change the tides of your legacy and restore and be redeemed in all things. And so this morning, today, if you don't have children, that's okay. I still recommend that you listen to this, because there's just life nuggets and life principles that are going to help you in your future as a mother and as a parent. And so again, I have a great PowerPoint, a really pretty PowerPoint for all of you to watch along with me and just move along with me. But we've got our guiding verse I'm going to share with you, and we'll dive right in here. How many of you guys are so excited about all the things that are happening here? I know I am just, my team is like, Jaime, you're just like glowing. And I'm like, I feel this new level in my own spirit, in my own inner person, my own soul, this awakening to even greater life. And when you think, man, my life is well, like, we worked so hard to get to where we are, and here we are, and I'm like, man, there's another level of just impact, and there's always going to be more and more and more and more. So all of us have so much to look forward to in life. And it's never too late. And I just want to reiterate that over and over and over again. It doesn't matter where you are. There's no mess too great. There's no story too broken. Just come as you are, but don't stay there. Okay, so let's dive in. Proverbs 31:28 through 29. Most of you have probably heard this verse before, but I'm gonna share it again. It's her children. This comes from the whole Proverbs 31 passage, where it talks about the entrepreneurial woman who was out buying and selling fields and making a profit, and laughing at the future and laughing at the days to come, because her household was taken care of, and she's a woman who rises early and works hard to provide for her staff, and she's got help in the home. And it's just an amazing picture of what life can look like for all of us as women. And I want to encourage you too, if you're thinking, and I'll get into this deeper here along the journey on this particular pillar, but there are so many ways to take the burden off. And I will tell you that without a revelation of what motherhood can look like, and without understanding some basic principles, motherhood can be very stressful. It can lack peace. It can be like a tornado having children if we're not grounded in some basic truths. So I'm going to share those today, because I want to paint a picture for you. It says, her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. How many of you guys have a vision for your family and have written it down? And how many of you have a vision for your children and you've written that down? And I don't mean like my child's going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, when I think about my 5 sons and them as grown men, when I pray over them at night, and when I pray over them during the day, when I think about them, I have a very clear vision of the men of character that they are becoming, and what my responsibility is as a mother to train them up in that. And there's going to be some different things that I'm going to talk about today that are going to help us remember what our calling as mothers are. And just to share some story here. Oh, you know what? And let me make sure that my face is on here with you guys. But I actually interviewed my father before I created some of these slides. And I learned so much growing up watching my dad. He had a master's degree in child development. He was very passionate about, and not only passionate and, you know, educated in this area, but he was also very gifted in just having this sort of divine wisdom in how to raise children. And there's a lot of things that he did with my brother and I that I look at and I think he was extraordinary in certain areas in this area of raising children. And so I'm going to share some of the wisdom that I learned from him as well. So let's put this at the forefront right now. Imagine your children in their adult years. And this is when I talk to women who are like, I don't know if I should have another baby. I don't know if I want to like go through that again. And I'm like, you know what? Every woman has to make a decision that is right for her. There's no right or wrong answer. But I will tell you one of the things that, because I never saw myself having 5 children. I always saw myself having, you know, a family, but 5 was like, wow, I'm having 5 children. But what kept me like in this journey of bearing more children was thinking about what it's going to be like when Nathan and I are in our elderly years, even, you know, I don't want to use the word elderly because it's not, just in our, I should say in our maturing years, where, you know, the Bible talks about grandparents. And I just always imagined this giant table. It's going to make me cry. Every one of these videos, I end up crying. But I imagine this giant table at Christmas or at Thanksgiving, and Nat King Cole is playing, and there's you know, multiple turkeys in the oven, and there's grandchildren running around, and my boys are just laughing together, and they're drinking, you know, their favorite beverage with Nathan, and they've got beards, and there is just this sense of family and life and joy. And I think about that sometimes when parenting gets challenging, because there's no like, I don't think there's a perfect journey, and I'm not going to come to you guys as having all of this figured out. I just want to encourage you. This pillar today is about encouraging you to remember what our place is as mothers in the lives of our children and what our responsibility is. It doesn't mean I have it all figured out or that I have a perfect family. It's, you know, it's a constant daily action of asking the Lord for wisdom, because sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what to do in this situation. God, you need to help me. You know, but I always keep that vision of they're beautiful wives who love the Lord, who have chosen to join us in our family and our vision. And there's just this sense of alignment and just life and you know, robust presence of the Lord. And so I'm working, even though I have, you know, my oldest is at this stage right now, he is 12, and my youngest is 2.5 months old. And I think about like what I need to do now to cultivate that into fruition, so that when my children rise up, they consider their life and their family and their parents, you know, they call us blessed. I just think that is something that is for all of us to work towards. Okay, so let's go and dive into the next slide here. So who are your children, and who are we as it pertains to parenting? So as I was talking to my dad, I really got this snapshot of what he was doing in my early years. You know, my dad was a very hard worker. He was an entrepreneur, and our position in our children's life is that of it's a parent, it's friend, but parenting comes first. We are there as guides to help them grow into their life calling and to prepare them for life in Christ and life as an adult. And one of the things that I talk about, even in my podcast, I've talked about why we chose to homeschool, because I thought, man, I was homeschooled, and we actually do more of an unschooling style. But I thought I spent only a couple of years in public school, and I felt like I wasted those years because I was all day sitting in a desk, when I'm like, man, all those years that we were on the farm and I got to learn hands-on. My dad would take me onto, you know, building sites with him. He was a builder, and I would learn how to roof houses, and I would learn how to shingle and, you know, put up drywall and frame homes and pour concrete and build a foundation and, you know, 2x4s and all the things. And uh, there was so much freedom in that. And so as parents, it's our job. What I would like to encourage you, especially with what's going on in the world right now, and is as all of us have gotten kind of tossed into a greater level of homeschooling, is to think about, man, this is an opportunity that we get to think differently about education, think differently about how we're raising our kids. I love the idea that my kids are not wasting years and years in this sort of, you know, desk situation where they're from 8 to 4 and then all the homework. Like my kids spend 3 hours a day, 3 days a week in a schooling. Like, we have a tutor. And so this is another thing I'm going to talk about when we get into the entrepreneurial pillar, is what kind of a life do you want to create for yourself and for your family? And I had a vision for having enough financial prosperity that I could hire help in the home. And so we have a tutor who teaches them. And but most of their education is hands-on. You know, it's cooking and baking together. Every one of my sons, other than my 4 and my 2-month old, know how to cook. They make breakfast, they can make dinner. Um, they're very resourceful. And so imagine your kids in a unique opportunity right now where you can take this time and put them in situations where they can actually be prepared. I wanted my kids, by the time they're, you know, 14, 15, 16 years old, prepared to buy, you know, my boys work here in the shop. We own a skincare company, and they work and they make their own money and they buy their own things. And we teach them how to save and sow and spend. You know, it's the 3 S's: save, sow, and spend. And so they learn how to give and be philanthropic. They learn how to, when they want something, they know that they can work. Teach your kids money mindset by showing them. And actually, the best thing we can do as parents is to behave the way that we want them to behave. We have to show them how to do the things that we want them to grow up doing. And so I exemplify to them financial prosperity. We never talk about, oh, I can't afford that. I'm like, if there's ever a time that you want something, they know that they can work to earn it, right? And so, how many times have we said before, I can't afford that, or we can't do that? So, what we've done is we've said, well, maybe we can't do it right now, but how can we get there? We have to work hard. We have to look for opportunities to find solutions for problems. That's how you make money, is you're finding solutions to a problem. My boys know if they want to make money, they're like, Mom, can I make some money? I want to buy this Lego set. And I'm like, yeah, have you looked around the house? Have you gone to the shop and asked them what they need help with? You need to find a problem and go solve the problem. And that's how you become a financial, you know, that's the beginning stages of being financially prosperous, is to be a problem solver. And so your children are moldable. They are going to do the things you do, and they're going to grow up being the person that you're training them up to be. And so I like to give them, so let's kind of dive into this. And so children, the Bible says that children are a blessing from the Lord. They're gifts. They're not supposed to be tyrants. We'll talk a little bit about discipline too, but your peace, one thing that I've learned to do over the last 12 years as a mother, and even since being married, is protect the peace in our home. And there's different ways you can do that. And so we'll talk a little bit about boundaries too, but who you are is you're a guide. You are preparing them for life. And I believe that the school system has robbed us of our fullness, I think. And not that there's not some blessing to having a school system. I know that there's great teachers out there, there's great schools out there, but I think that we need to shift our thinking and how we're educating, because I think for a lot of children, they're losing their childhood, they're losing their creativity to the system, and there's a better way. So we are guides, we are friends, we are disciplinarians, and our children are gifts. And the Bible says that, you know, when you were in your mother's womb, when your children were conceived, God in his throne room placed gifts inside and packaged your children up. Have you thought, you know, if you've got 1, 2, 3, have you ever thought like, man, I'm looking at my 2.5-month-old right now, and I'm thinking, He already has a personality. He will sit, and I've got videos of him for minutes where he'll sit and talk to me. I'll say, "Hi, Noble, how are you doing?" And he'll coo at me, and he'll stop and I'll respond, and then he'll coo again. And it's like he already has this thing that the Lord has placed inside of him. And so we are stewards of our children as well. I should have put those out in list form, but we're stewards of their gifts. We are to train them up and help them to apply their gifts. And so, how do we do that? Um, and I want to encourage you guys, parenting can be a peaceful and joyful journey. Even if you think it's too late, even if your kids are out of the house, you can restore peace in that relationship and joy in that relationship. Um, Train them up in the way that they should go. How do we do that? There's going to be a lot of, this is where we have a mastermind I'm going to talk about at the end of the week next week. But these are things of like, this is the what, but how do you cultivate that in your children? How do you train them up? And one of the things I loved talking to my dad about was, he was like, if I could go back to the beginning, Jamie, he said, I would do so many things differently. Um, and I would not make, like, we had the ways that he disciplined were, I think, great ways. We had three things. If you were directly disobedient, if you lied, or if you had a bad attitude, those were discipline worthy. And he's like, I would have defaulted to different styles of disciplining for those three things if I could go back. And so we talked about that today, and it was really refreshing because I was like, wow, it's good for me to notate that. But training them up is training them up in the word, making the Bible and making all of God's promises come to life in them. And you do that through example, right? We're not just teaching them, we're doing them. We're not just hearers of the word as parents, we're doers of the word. And your children need to see you doing and acting on the word, and having this home that is all about, and making it known that it's okay to fail, and being quick to apologize. And one of the things I want to do as we're going through this challenge is, if there's areas that are being highlighted to you, we're like, man, I really want to make this right. It's okay. It's the kindness of the Lord that leads us to repentance. And repenting is one of the most um, freeing actions that we can take, where we go to the Lord and we say, you know what, I was wrong. Give me wisdom and show me how to do it right, Lord. And then going in the other direction and beginning to restore and do things differently is so powerful. I've done that over and over and over again. And it's how we grow, right? But creating an environment in your home where not only you can fail safely, but your children can fail, because it's better for them to fail in the home than it is to fail as adults. And so what does that mean? Fail financially, like, oh, you might have spent too much here and now you don't have money to spend on this other thing that you wanted because you were overspending, or you were not responsible here. And so now there's a consequence for that, but they're learning that all throughout their childhood and in the home, so that there's less failure in life as adults. Don't be afraid. So this was my dad. This is a quote. I should have put quotes here, and then dad, Papa. I call him Papa. Don't be afraid to let your kids try new things, even if it means they're going to fail. And so I know oftentimes we can kind of get into nagging mode, right? Like nagging our children. And so what happens when you nag your kids? They become deflated. They become de-energized. They start to lose vision for their life. Your kids have dreams. If you think about yourself as a young person, we had dreams growing up, right? I remember thinking about my life as a 5-year-old, imagining myself doing all these things. And one of the things that I love about how my dad parented was he let us fail constantly, but he was very quick to walk us through those things. He spent a lot of time communicating, and you can do that with your kids. You can take time. Bedtime is one of the most powerful times with your kids, to talk about the day, to talk about the things that they made mistakes in, even talk about your own mistakes. I'll like raise my voice and I'll be like, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. And I'm really sorry that I got upset with you. And it's really important that we just keep that line of communication open. Your children will trust you when they see you fail and then communicate, and they'll trust you when you let them fail and then you walk them through it. Building trust with your kids is so important. They already just admire you. I remember, thinking my parents were like, they were my heroes when I was younger. And now just, I have great relationships with both my parents. Um, let them experience life and test the waters, right? Let them do things. And um, otherwise, here's the words that my dad used, and I thought it was funny. I was typing notes, and he's like, they'll become basket cases. They'll become bummed out and non-productive if we're constantly reining them in. What we want to do is channel their energy and channel them into doing and taking opportunities. If they have ideas to do stuff, there's times that I get stressed out because I'm like, my boys are like, can I do this? And I'm like, immediately my mom brain is like, that's going to make a huge mess. That's going to like, it's going to take you guys hours to clean it up. You're going to be late for your bedtime. And so I have to remember in my own heart to let the reins loose, and give them room to like try things, and let them go through uncharted waters and take risks. And but let's talk a little bit about discipline. Discipline is really important. And here's the thing: if you have too much love and no discipline, you'll have spoiled children. If you have too much discipline and not enough love, then you're going to have very hard-hearted and frustrated children. And so we want to bring love and discipline together, and marry the two. And so have boundaries with your kids. I have a very firm bedtime for the most part, unless they're like, so we just bought this card game, and Nathan bought a card table so it's like 8:30 at night the other night, and all the boys, I could hear them downstairs. Nathan and all the boys are laughing so hard. And we have a family movie night, and so they have to pay attention to their own bedtime. And if it's 8:25, and Seth knows his bedtime's at 8:25 at night, it was 8:15, and he was like, can I please have an extra 10 minutes? And I'm like, okay, your bedtime's 8:25. So they're like, can we please go past our bedtime because we're having so much fun? And so I'm like, they're laughing, they're building relationship with Nathan. Like, how can I say no to that? But for the most part, Nathan and I have strong boundaries about bedtime because our time at night is so critical. Like, don't let your children overrun your life. Have boundaries with them, even giving them alone time where they can, like, hey, it's your time to go into the dining room or like maybe the basement and read alone for a little while and just be okay being alone, because Papa and I are going to hang out and we're going to talk and we're going to have our time together. And nighttime is our time for that. But with discipline, let me just talk about some ideas that might feel a little bit foreign to some of you, especially if you're a new mom. For all of our mature women who are in the mentor stage of life, this might make you chuckle a little bit. You might be like, yep, we did that, or no, we didn't think about that, or we did it this way. Love to hear your thoughts on this, but work works. And so one of the things we have our boys do is we have the 3 things, and we're actually working on, I just posted the 21 rules of this house, and we're going to start kind of incorporating some of that into our boundaries. But the 3 things are direct disobedience, lying, and bad attitude. When the kids are whiny or they have a bad attitude, there's discipline for that. And they know that you cross the line. I don't give them warnings. They obey right away. This is really important. You'll notice that there's a lack of peace in the home when you start getting really lax in them crossing boundaries, because then what happens is everything becomes kind of chaotic. And so we have them, I'll find work for them to do. And I'll be like, you know what? Here's a toothbrush, here's a bucket and some soap, and I'm going to have you scrub all of the trim and all of the base trim in the entire house. And it's going to take you the rest of the day. Now you want to balance like the the misdemeanor or the offense with the discipline. You don't want to overkill. So that's where you want to have wisdom. But there's times when I'm like, you know what? This is something we've talked about before, and I need to take it to the next level. So now you're basically going to be working for the rest of the day. We'll have them haul bricks and just work. And something happens in their heart where they're like, and I hate to use the word, it breaks them. But what you want is for them to come into a place of humility where they're like, and you can sense as a parent when this happens, when they come to me and they're like, it's not like I just want to get out of this work. But they'll come to me, they'll be like, I'm so sorry that I did that. And they have this, they've been humbled. And then what happens is there's a restoration, and then they feel like there's the boundary, and then there's a restoration. And so you never want to discipline in anger. You always want to discipline in patience, and you want to be consistent with your discipline. You're reaching their hearts. We as parents are shepherding their hearts. So I always like to talk about, we're not altering behavior, we're actually speaking into their hearts, and you want to affect change in their hearts, in the inner man. Because if it's just behavioral correction, then what they're going to be is little puppets that grow up to like have these inner turmoils and attitudes, and not, and just, maybe good behavior. But we want our children to grow up in a place of self-assurance and being at peace with themselves. And so when we are reaching their hearts, it's like you're looking at, always be looking at the motivation and the attitudes. And that is ultimately what we're reaching and what we're correcting and what we're disciplining. It's not a behavioral correction. It's going to the heart of the issue and disciplining them on that level. And work does work, but you want to stay consistent with it, and you want to be gentle and kind in your discipline. And I know that's oftentimes very difficult. I have failed in that area oftentimes. Like I get frustrated, but that's where obey right away is so critical, because when they test your boundaries, when they test and test and push and push and push, it causes frustration. And then as parents, we eventually it can lead to a blow up, right? And so when they know that mom's not going to give them a count to three, and even the food, like I'm going to do a whole podcast around just food issues. Now more than ever, we have kids who think that their mom is like the chef, and like she's making 3-4 meals at dinner time. And kids will never starve themselves. I'm like, this is what I put in front of you. This is what you're going to eat. If you don't like it, you don't have to eat. And what happens is, like 3 hours later, they're starving and they're like, can I have some toast with jelly? I'm like, no, your dinner's still on the table. That's what you're going to eat. That's what I put in front of you. And what happens is they learn to enjoy foods and textures, and they learn that oftentimes for children, it's an area of control. And I know that sounds crazy, because we don't like to think of our children as having this thing about control, but I look at 2-year-olds often, and they know how to control and manipulate the home and manipulate their moms. And you can't let your children manipulate you and control the atmosphere and the environment in the home. You have to always maintain authority in your home. As soon as you give up your authority, whether it's to your parents, this is where boundaries really are important. Some parents have tried to come in and try to tell you how to run your home and raise your children. You cannot let that happen. That's a foothold for the enemy. Whenever you give up authority in the home, whether it's to your parents, to a well-meaning mentor, or to your children, you have the authority God has given. That's authority is actually a God-given mantle. It's something that the Lord has placed on you that you need to steward well. And so do not give up your authority. That's critical. You will lose peace. This is where children grow up and they become wayward, and they become a detriment to themselves, because they have oftentimes just it creates a lack of stability in themselves. And so children actually crave discipline. They crave order and boundaries, and they want to see you assert yourself as the authority in the home. So don't be afraid to assert yourself. It doesn't matter if your kids are teenagers now. Let me just tell you, I don't have teenagers yet, but one thing I can say is we never went through terrible twos, because I was disciplining my children. My children know that when I speak and when I give them a directive, that I mean what I say. And that's very important for them. And so we didn't go through all this nasty, terrible twos. I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to have 5 kids, because I'm like, I look at some homes and I think, man, I feel for these mothers who are so stressed out because they've not pressed into the revelation of how to correctly, I don't want to say correctly, there's different ways to parent, but one thing that is for sure as a resounding principle is you must maintain authority, but you do it with love and gentleness and kindness, and guiding them and communicating with them, and then holding boundaries, and then consequences for when they cross the line. It's really important. We're shepherding their hearts. Consistent love, consistent discipline. It's constant. It's something that they will grow to be very self-assured people and adults because there's that consistency. Here's something that's really important too. The Bible says, parents, do not provoke your children in a way that ends up discouraging them. I think about a situation where it's like, so often I see parents like almost putting their kids in a situation where they're bound to constantly fail. Expectations are too high, or it's like that. When I think about the three things that are the boundary lines, the disobedience, no lying, and no bad attitudes. Well, let's say they like, as 3-year-olds, they color on the wall, or I'm trying to think of like a really good example of how we can exasperate our children. Don't put them in a situation where they can't win, right? Because they're going to end up frustrated. And even in discipline and training, encourage your children to rise. A disciplined situation should not make them feel like when they walk away, they're beating themselves over the head. A disciplinary, whenever you have to take time to discipline your children or to correct them, they should feel empowered, not discouraged, right? So that's something that we can all be working on. And this is a lot of information, I know. And it's something that just, if your needle is way over here, the pendulum is way over here, it's okay. Now's the time to start just taking steps towards, and one of the things that one of my mentors told me this when about probably 15 years ago, she said, as leaders, we lead ourselves first. And so it starts with coming into peace, at a place of peace with yourself, and repenting and coming to peace with mistakes that we've made, and knowing that the Lord is a merciful and gracious God, and that he will use every situation. He says, everything will work out for our good according to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so if you've made mistakes, if you feel like, man, I'm so far away from this, it's okay. I tell you what, in an instant, the Lord can begin to miraculously turn your situation around. He can start dropping wisdom and taking those steps, loving steps towards just restoring relationship with your kids, and creating that peace in your home. It's never too late. And again, the challenge for today, this is not necessarily the challenge, but you can create, I talked about this in the marriage pillar yesterday, but you can create a haven in your home. So here's your challenge for the day, guys. I want you guys, whether you have 40-year-old children or 4-year-old children or 4-month-old children or 14-year-old children, pull your kids into your proverbial lap. If they're little, pull them into your lap, rock them, love on them. If they're older, give them a phone call and communicate your vision for them and your belief in them. For my kids, like my boys have been doing things that I'm like, wow, Judah just made this whole wooden sword that is who's in the Lord of the Rings, what's his name, the wizard guy, I can't remember, Gandalf. He made Gandalf's sword and he sanded it, and it was this beautiful sword. And he's like, I think I want to make a business out of making these crafted like wooden swords. And I'm like, oh, let's build you a funnel and let's do it. But I communicated to him, Judah, you have this ability as an entrepreneur, and I'll breathe life into his gifts and his skills, and I'll share vision about, like, we'll talk about the future with him. If you're not a visionary, that's okay. You could be like, you know what, you know how I see this like playing out, like you were, and call out the gifts and the skills and encourage them, and believe in them, right? And let them know when they're doing things right. It's almost like anything else in life, even in marriage. Like, you want to, if you bring correction, feed their accounts, feed their bank accounts with positive and encouragement. And here's the thing, we talk about the love languages. If your child loves getting gifts, write them a card. And if they're if they love verbal affirmation, give them a card. I feel like writing and making your child a card is going to cover all the gifts. Like, it's acts of service, it's verbal affirmation, it's, and by pulling them into your lap, obviously if they're not proximal, then you can't necessarily touch them. But, we are very, like, I hug my kids all the time. I kiss their cheeks. I run my fingers through their hair. Be loving towards your children and communicate and believe in them, and take some time to do that. And if it's bedtime, whatever the case may be, just love on them, love on them, love on them. You cannot overdo affection and just bringing life into their sweet little hearts. And remember, children are a blessing from the Lord, and the blessing of the Lord makes rich and it adds no sorrow. That's what the Bible talks about. And so, how do we do that? We do that just by cultivating relationship and communication and discipline and kindness towards our family and towards our children. And by holding those boundaries, you can restore peace in the home. And that's just protect that peace at all costs. So that's our pillar for the day, guys. I'm going to stop share. So excited for all of you mothers. I feel like this could turn the tide for all of you. This is the beginning of a new chapter in your life as a parent, and I'm in it with you guys. I've got littles, and I've got crazy, I've got a business, we've got businesses, and we have ministry that we're doing. We have children, and it's like it can be done. Whatever your vision is to do, create it and build it, and stand by your family, and get into the word, and find a scripture that speaks to your inner man. And just as Nathan talked about in that, if you haven't yet, I encourage you to watch the video, The 4 Core Pillars of Becoming. He talks about how to bear fruit, and part of it is taking spiritual responsibility and personal responsibility, and getting into the word and chewing on that word and digging into it and asking God to make it come alive until it breaks forth as light, and that becomes hope. And then revelation becomes hope, and then hope means that it's like, okay, I'm going to take action on this thing and do the thing. And so as parents, we have such a great high calling to raise mighty men and women of God who are going to change the world. And so it starts in the home, and you guys can do it. You have everything you need right inside of here. It's not out of your reach. You are not a failure. You have been given the gifts and the tools to do everything you need to do to be the mother that you envision yourself being. So love you guys. Have a wonderful day. I can't wait to see you guys on the next pillar. We'll have a great day. Talk soon.